It's been a long time since I've been really annoyed with something, and it's been a long time since I've made a rant video. And that was mostly because I thought, for the longest time, most of the gods were actually quite balanced. I actually think that balance is still in a pretty good state overall, but that doesn't mean that some of the gods that are currently towards the top aren't absolutely annoying. And as such, we're bringing rants back, and today I'm gonna rant about Ne Zha. Ne Zha used to be a pretty interesting god actually, a pretty rarely played god that had this high skill cap to him, which is why most people avoided him, and he also at the same time was rarely really top tier, so you know, he was just there, kind of along with Uller until Uller got all his buffs. There was a niche of Ne Zha players that played him very well, and those were the ones that primarily played him, and everyone else just kind of played him a little bit and then failed playing him and dropped him once again. Positioning was very crucial with Ne Zha, and actually to this day still is rather important, because you really have to have the engage into the team fight at the right point, otherwise you just get blown up by the enemies. Then Hyris had the glorious idea of removing his RNG passive. One of the few gods where the RNG passive actually makes absolute sense, because multiple parts of his kit revolve around crit. But nope, no more RNG passive. Instead, his Righteous Spirit would now get buff stacks that give him 0.5% movement speed per stack and 1 physical power, stacking up to 20 times still, so 10% movement speed and 20 physical power. And that was the beginning of the damn madness that we have today. Somehow it feels like somebody didn't really think through the rest of his kit when doing this passive. You see, the passive made absolute perfect sense. It was a little bit of a clear amplification if you got a crit, and it was a better gank opportunity if you had the passive up, and overall just very worthwhile. But now, instead of just having more damage, you also get more rotation speed. Ne Zha was already one of the fastest clearing junglers beforehand, who gets up to 40% movement speed from his ring toss. Now he gets an additional 10% because why not, and that's from the start of the game before you even have boots. So you can just speed around the jungle and be the first one at mid camps in pretty much any situation, unless you get a head up in solo or something. Oh yeah, and between your AoE cleave and the ring toss you also clear those incredibly fast, so you're probably in mid lane before the other jungler even shows up. Yet at the same time, the whole concept of the movement speed buff is absolutely annoying. Ne Zha has AoE cleaves, so he naturally clears a camp relatively quickly, and especially the small minions will die before the big one. You will get the most amount of clear out of a ring toss that bounces between the targets a lot, obviously. So how does that work together? Actually not at all. If you clear a camp with basic attacks first to get the movement speed buff from ring toss at the end, then you basically waste shots of ring toss, because you either bounce them on targets that are almost dead or just throw them on the last target standing because of your AoE cleaves. Or you can use the ring toss at the start and then you waste your movement speed buff. Unless obviously you insta-clear the camp, which in most situations you don't. So neither is actually synergistic at all with the movement speed buff being tied to the ring toss. Especially since if you get less bounces because one of the targets is almost dead, you will also get less movement speed. So technically it would almost be best with Ne Zha to use 3 basic attacks on a camp, turn away for the AoE cleave so you don't hit the small minions, and then towards the end when the big minion is almost dead, use your ring toss, because that way you get the ideal movement speed increase while also clearing the camp and actually making use of the movement speed increase. But that makes absolutely no sense when you actually think about it. And as we're already talking about annoying features, let's talk about the RNG that is tied to the one. Depending on how many bounces you can get anywhere between 15 protection shred against a target and 60 protection shred against a target. So a minor part of the protections, that is pretty much like one normal pen item, or all the protections of a squishy. Almost the same thing, right? And it only depends on how many times it bounces between them or onto them, and also how many other enemies are around. And sometimes it even depends on how lucky you are with the distance between the targets, if there's a little bit of lag that is factored in and whatnot, and depending on that, you can completely destroy an enemy or just do a little bit of tickle damage to them. It feels absolutely awkward. Why is this not more consistent? Make it reduce 20 protections at the first bounce, but then in successive bounce it only reduces an extra 5 up to 30 and cap it there or something, instead of making it all over the place. I mean, other abilities actually have higher damage on their initial hit and then get reduced damage afterwards, as is for example the case for Nuwa with her 1 or for Kuzenbo with her ultimate, but that wouldn't make too much sense for the ring toss, right? And as we're already talking about stupid RNG, have you looked at the 15% crit chance that now completely stands on its own? Beforehand, we had the passive with extra crit chance, so it kind of made sense. It gave you a decent amount of crit chance. Wasn't 100% reliable, but a good chance you would get a crit off. Now, your chance to get a crit is significantly lower and you can go many teamfights without actually getting a single crit, but at the same time, you get more power from your passive, so if you get one crit, it actually has a bigger impact as it does more damage immediately. So again, the RNG actually has increased here rather than decreasing. Being hit by a 3 as a crit right now feels so unsatisfying because it's really down to bad luck rather than beforehand being like, okay, he just activated his 2 and he has his passive up and well, I guess I'm gonna get crit with a decent chance at least. Nope, now we're just having this little chance to crit and if you are unlucky then you're out. I could also rant about his 3 being a self-CC as much as a CC, which feels super awkward to use even after having played him for a very long time. Or I could complain about his ult having up to 310% scaling if you crit all the ult hits, which you should. But really, in the bigger picture, it doesn't even matter that much. Ne Zha is in every single game now, either in support because people don't actually want to play support so they pick Ne Zha, or in jungle or in solo, he's literally everywhere. And somehow, most people still don't understand how to play with a Ne Zha on your team. How many times will you go in as Ne Zha, engage on the enemy, get a good pick and almost dead target and your team will not follow up at all? They will literally back out the moment you engage, not realizing that Ne Zha has no way out once his ultimate is used. You see that over and over and over, and it's actually so tilting to watch if you're playing Ne Zha yourself, or if you're on the enemy team and you see the enemy team just completely ignoring their Ne Zha going in on his own. You either pub stomp or you're out with Ne Zha, and that still goes even more than it was the case before already. And last but not least, the guy has multiple damn voice packs with very male voice lines right now, and people still call him a she in 2018. Can we please figure this out finally? This is a guy. He's the Lotus Prince, not Princess. It isn't that hard. And with that, thank you guys for watching. If you're new to the channel, feel free to sub and with well, dreams me out. Other than that, see you for the next one tomorrow. DukeSloth out.